Welcome to Generations at Work, where our goal is to build bridges and not walls between the different generations in the workplace. Today's topic is building a whatever it takes attitude in each generation on the team, here today at Generations at Work. And with me today is Dr. Tim Elmore, our generational expert with over 35 books and a new one on the way. Dr. Elmore, great to have you with us today.
Great to be with you, Susan. This is going to be a fun conversation.
This is a timely conversation because I was with a team yesterday and this was the topic. And so I was excited that this was going to be our topic today. But, each generation shows up at work with a different attitude towards their job. And what I'm
Yeah.
noticing and what I saw even yesterday is each generation has a feeling about that attitude of the other generation. So,
Yeah.
some professionals look at older generations and say, they don't understand. All they do is work. And then the other generation might say, well, they don't understand. We just want to work differently. So there's just so many different attitudes towards how we show up at work every day. So I want to unpack that a little bit and get your thoughts around how do we create this whatever it takes attitude with the different generations on the team, and then how do we merge them together?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's where we're going. I just want to say, as I've interacted with business people, young and old, the answer almost always is in the middle. Meaning, if a Gen Zer comes in and goes, "You guys are a bunch of workaholics. I want work-life balance," and the older boomers maybe are going, "Well, you should, the work is everything. This is what you should be loyal to." The answer probably is in the middle. We do need some sense of balance. We need a life outside of work, and yet at the same time, we need commitment from those new team members that may not be ready to make a commitment right away. So this will be a fun conversation.
Absolutely. And there may be an obvious answer to this, but what do you think leads? Like, why do we have such a diverse, different view from the different generations on what work is really about? What
Yeah,
is going
yeah.
on there?
Well, my research shows me that each generation really reacts to the others, which is not a surprise. So the younger generations coming into work today in their 20s look at older generations and go, "Oh my gosh, OMG, you guys live to work." And in response, they would say, "We work to live." So they've seen what older generations have done to their personal lives. Uh, maybe they ruined a marriage,
Mm,
by their workaholism. Maybe, not always.
not always.
Or maybe they just didn't have any healthy life outside of work. And Gen Z goes, "I don't want that." Let me reiterate something I've said before. It's helpful to know that each generation is shaped by the culture in which they grew up. So it's
Mm,
not that we don't change as we get older, but there's a foundation laid for how we look at work in the
yeah,
first 20 to 20 years, 25 years of our life. So
yeah.
I remember starting my career, gosh, about 45 years ago, right about 1979, 1980. And John Maxwell was my leader by the early 80s. And John was a classic baby boomer back then. He sunk everything into his work. Now,
Hmm.
I think he had a good home life too, but John modeled for me, man, you commit to
Work
your
ethic.
work, to this team.
Yeah.
He was up early. I tried to beat him to the office, and I
You can't
could
do
not.
that.
There at 6 a.m. He'd be there at 5 a.m. So,
Yeah.
but that was John. That was a classic baby boomer. And all the way
Yeah.
through his career and all the way through mine, I'm a late baby boomer. He's an early baby boomer,
Mm,
but that's kind of how we were back then. You commit to the organization as long as you're there. But let me say one more thing, Susan, that we rarely hear. Right about 1970, when the very first baby boomers were entering the workforce, there was a published article in the New York Times that swept the nation. It was called the Friedman Doctrine. Milton Friedman was a
okay.
professor, and he said the social responsibility of business is to increase the profits. So he didn't
Okay.
think social responsibility was to improve the community or change people's lives or change the world. It was to increase profits. So think about it. All of us young whippersnappers way back in 1970s uh, just believed it was about revenue. Now, I'm
Revenue.
not saying we didn't care about anything else, but you can see why younger generations would go, "Are you kidding me? You're not trying to
Mhm.
make the community better. And I think many did both, but that really informs the older mindset and may explain it to someone that's younger listening to this podcast right now.
Gosh, I feel like we could go so many places here. Let's go because I have a ton of questions. But if anybody that follows you knows, this is not just anecdotal. You do a lot of research. You do a lot of focus groups, and you've done some focus groups with Gen Z. Now,
Yeah,
there's a lot of myths, right? Older. I just had this discussion yesterday. But I
yeah,
had baby boomers and Gen Xers in the room, and they don't want to work. They don't this, and these are myths.
yeah.
So tell us what you've learned from these focus groups. About the myths that some of the older generations have on Gen Z.
Yeah, that's a great question, Susan. Well, I have interviewed hundreds of these Gen Zers from California to Virginia, and I just fell in love with them as they shared their mindset.
Yeah.
All behavior has a reason, doesn't it? Good or bad, all
Yes.
behavior has a reason. Uh, you, as a mother, know that's true about your kids.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, my new book this fall, called The Future Begins with Z, I have an entire chapter dedicated to the six biggest myths that we have bought
Oh, that's
into
gonna be good.
about these young generations. Let me just real quick share two that I hear
Oh
all the
yeah.
time that might
All right.
encourage listeners right now. So, myth number one is, uh, like you just said, Susan, well, they just don't have any work ethic. Those
I hear
young
it. Yeah.
team members, they just don't want to work. They want to, at 5 o'clock rolls around, they want to leave as soon as the clock strikes five and not a minute longer. They don't want to finish the tasks they're working on like the rest of us do. So I remember talking to Natalie. Natalie was an early 20s young lady that I interviewed in LA. And it was very interesting. I talked to her about how we have this belief that Gen Z wants to leave at five and not work a minute longer. And
Hmm.
she smiled at me and said, "May I tell you why I leave right at five?"
Oh
And I
wow.
said, "Sure." And she said, "Well, I leave right at five because I have to jet right over to another job. I don't
Wow.
make enough at this first job to pay the bills. And then after that shift is over,
Mm.
I run over to my mom's house to take care of her because
Wow.
she has stage four cancer." Well, suddenly I am more informed than my stereotype that I had just a minute earlier. And that
Hmm.
was good for me to hear that yeah, there is some lazy Gen Zers, just like there's some lazy boomers. But that
Yes.
was helpful to me. I'll tell you another myth though, Susan.
Hmm.
Another myth is, well, Gen Z isn't loyal. They're
I hear
just in
that.
and out.
Hmm.
They job hop. The corporate
Hmm.
ladder has become the corporate lily pad, that sort of
Hmm.
nonsense. But and to many degrees, it is true. There are some gig workers that are Gen Zers. They tend to do the gig economy more than any other generation, meaning they
Yeah.
have three or four jobs, not just one going on.
Yeah.
But let me say, I learned that Gen Z can be very loyal, but they're less loyal to institutions and more loyal to people.
People.
So if their supervisor, their boss, is very good to them and really begins to coach them and mentor
Mm.
them and help them, they'll be just as loyal as anybody else, young or old. But here's one of the trouble spots that makes us feel like they're not loyal. Gen Zers reminded me that when they entered the workplace in 2020, they started that new job, let's say in February. And you remember what happened in March of 2020?
Yes, we
The
do.
pandemic.
COVID. Yeah.
We all were sent home. And Generation Z, not all, but there were more Generation Zers that were laid off than any other generation, more than millennials, Xers, or boomers. So they're a little gun shy. They're going, well, you weren't too loyal to me, Bob. Why should you expect me
Yeah.
to be loyal to you? So many of them said, and when I say many, four or five of them I heard say, I feel like I'm treated like a commodity, like not something to
Mm.
be invested in, but something to be bought and sold. And I don't want my Gen Zers to feel that way. So, listeners, if you have some young 20 somethings on your team, make sure they don't feel like just a commodity that is bought and sold and they're easy to get rid of and easy to obtain. Really
Yeah.
invest in them and see if you might find loyalty coming right back at you.
I mean, Tim, you and I don't want to be treated like a commodity. It doesn't matter what generation it is. And I love that you said they're loyal to people and not the institution. And which reminds me of the thing we teach at level two leadership is about the relationship, the connection, and the law of buy in, saying people buy into the leader not the organization. So that makes complete sense to me. Now, I feel like, and this is the next question, I feel like the younger generations, the millennials, the Gen Zers, I feel like they feel how people feel about them, right? And I feel it's very heavy in workplaces. Why do you think the younger generations now, the millennials, the Gen Zers, are pushing back? They're pushing back on that mindset of commitment, sacrifice, loyalty, all the things you're talking about that older generations oftentimes have that attitude towards.
Yeah, I do see that, by the way. It's
Hmm.
not just a few, it's a good number of them. So I guess I go back to the pandemic point I was making earlier. Think about it. Many of them were young and still are young, and the
Hmm.
pandemic still haunts them, meaning they feel like they would be the first
Haunts
ones
us
to be
all,
let
right?
yeah, yeah, it's very true. So I would say to any leader that's listening right now, trust cannot be assumed in that young
Mm,
team member. It needs to be
absolutely.
earned. So again, when I was young, I just trusted John Maxwell. I just felt like he had my best interest in mind, and I think he
Mm,
did. But because John really invested in me, he was ahead of his time, actually. But I think that when it comes to this question, we need to remember that if we show that we're making commitments to them, they'll be more likely to make commitments to the organization. Now, that
mm,
doesn't mean you spend personal time every day, 4 hours a day, coaching and mentoring, but you need to make sure that you let them know them beyond 9 to 5, that
yeah.
you learn something about them and you earn their trust through a bridge with them, not a badge you wear. I know I've said that before, it's kind of cliche, but I really believe that's true. So let me just real quick give you one more thought on this. When you're delegating a task to a Gen Z or a young team member,
Yeah.
share the why before you share the what. Meaning, I'm used to just delegating a task and
Hmm.
saying, here's what I want you to do, go. I
Yeah.
think they need us to say, and let me tell you why this task is so
To
important to our
understand.
mission.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Let me help connect the dots for you. And when we do that, and we're leading descriptively, not prescriptive, we're describing the goal and saying, here's why we need to do it, rather than
Mm.
telling them 7 steps you want them to take. I think we're going to get their sacrifice and their commitment a lot more readily than we do just leading in the old traditional ways that we used to.
What if your book had the expert backing it deserves? Join best-selling author Tim Elmore and a team of publishing pros for their next book in a weekend event, happening February 27th through March 1st, 2026, in Alpharetta, Georgia. You'll get expert coaching, insider tools, access to publishers and editors, and a shot to pitch your book. One participant will even land a book deal with Maxwell Leadership Publishing. Apply now at abookinAweekend.com. Your story is worth it.
This is so good. I don't know why it's so hard because in life, right, we meet somebody at the PTO meeting or church
Yeah,
or wherever, and we naturally have a conversation with them. And we come to
yeah,
work and we think, oh, they're a different generation. I can't connect with them. So
yeah, yeah,
it's interesting. It's like we leave that at home sometimes where
yeah.
there are people
So
they
true.
just want to build that relationship. So
Yeah,
which leads, how do we do it? So let's now we've seen the why, right? How do we
yeah,
cultivate this do whatever it takes mindset for each
yeah,
generation? And this is in every
yeah.
generation, not just Z.
That's so true. So you're right. This is a general attitude check for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, if you remember, our producer Wade, who's listening in right now,
Yeah.
kind of sparked this conversation.
Yeah.
I think Wade was talking about his dad, who is working at a place, and there were some younger team members that were asked to do something that they felt like was below their master's degree. I don't know,
Mm,
pick up trash in the parking lot or something like that.
yeah.
And they said, "Hey, I didn't get my master's degree to do something stupid like that."
Oh,
And I don't think they meant to have a bad attitude, but theirs was, "I spent a lot of time and money on this degree. Why would you ask me to do something small?" But something John Maxwell modeled for me way back in the early 80s was this, yeah, if you're walking across the parking lot, there's a piece of trash, you pick it up.
you
You
pick it
don't think
up.
about what your title is. You
People
go,
are
this
watching
is,
you. People are watching you.
that's right. Yeah. So he modeled the way and he taught it. I know that's so simple. He modeled what he was asking me to do, this whatever it takes, do whatever is in front of you right now. if you're watching, let's say, a football game
Hmm.
and the ball is fumbled by the offensive team, the guy on defense doesn't look down at the ball and say, "Hey, this is not my job. I'm not a ball carrier.
They
I'm a
go after it.
defender. Yeah, come on, come on." No, he picks up the ball even though it's not his normal job, and he carries the ball into the end zone. Now,
Yeah.
he has strengths for a different position, but you do what you got to do to score. That's what I think we need to do. We need to think we're players on a team, and if the ball is dropped, we need to pick
I
up that
love
ball and
that.
run.
I'm sitting here think I love that analogy. When the football is dropped, the
Yeah,
whole team rushed because we want to win. How do we
yeah,
get so lost in the workplace of this mindset? It's like we all need to take a step back and start making some shifts. We need to just
yeah,
take some shifts.
yeah,
Everybody's going to need to make them. It's not the responsibility of just one generation. So, what are some of the
yeah,
shifts that everyone's going to have to make? Because this, I mean,
yeah.
ownership creates that accountability culture. So, how do we do it, Tim? How do we do it?
Okay, I'll share just a few ideas, but Susan, I'm sure you've got some good ones as well.
Uh,
First and foremost, I have noticed what works for me as a seasoned veteran, as a leader, is if I communicate to my young team members that I've got their best interest in mind, they tend to have the organization's best interest in mind in return. So, but I have to lead the way. I'm showing them I care about them as a person, then they tend to care about the organization I lead in response.
yeah.
So start with step one, care about the person beyond the job, and they'll care a little bit more about the job. Okay. So that's
Mhm.
thought number one. Um, One other thought that comes to my mind in regard to this question about the shifts, I think we need to make sure everybody learns say, to stop saying, I didn't get my degree to do this small task.
Yeah.
Instead, we need to learn to say, I'll do whatever it takes. The early tasks are not about talent, but about trust. When I give interns a job, I'm not saying this is all I think you're capable of.
Mm,
I'm giving them a small job at the beginning to say, can you faithfully execute this little job? And if you do, I'll give you bigger jobs.
I like it.
So trust, not talent, is the early, and I think we need to communicate that to team members.
That's
Another
so
thought
good.
I have is we need to teach everybody to not say, I refuse to do anything that stands in the way of my boundaries. A lot of young Gen Zers have boundaries, on their personal life.
Hmm.
Instead, I think say, if you help me with my work-life balance, I'll do whatever it takes for this organization. But once again, we got to lean into them and let them know you don't have to look out for number one. I'm looking out for you. Now,
Hmm.
please look out for the mission you've been given. That's a trade we're going to have to make, but that means we need to care.
Yeah,
One
we're gonna
last
have
thought.
to care.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. One last thought. Everybody needs to not say, I'm just looking out for number one, like I just said, but say, I will
Hmm.
look out for the best interest of my colleagues as we pursue this single mission. I
Hmm.
remember, Susan, I think I told you about this in one of our conversations, but my very first job evaluation from John Maxwell when I was 23 years old involved this.
Oh wow.
Um, he sat down with me and said, I love this, this, and this about you. And of course, I wrote those things down, knowing he'd finally seen the
Yes.
jewel he had found in me.
Great that you were, right?
That's right, absolutely. Finally, somebody notices.
Somebody
But
noticed, right?
here's what's really funny. John said, "Now there's a few things you're going to need to work on," and I leaned in and said, "I beg your pardon." I didn't
You just
think
said how
he.
great I was, right?
Yeah, that's right. But John talked to me about not seeing the big picture,
Mm,
not looking out for anything beyond my department. And he said, Tim, if you want to go higher, you've got to see the big picture.
so good.
And I, from that point on, I made that my conscious pursuit. But I needed my leader to remind me, you got to see more than just your specific role and your tasks on this
Mm.
team. So yeah, that's
Tim,
it there.
I even hate to admit it, but that happened to me early in my career. And I called him my coach, but one of my first leaders, he said, you say a lot of I's. You say a lot of I's and me,
Ooh, yeah,
and you got to start saying we's. You got to
yeah,
look at the bigger picture. I hate
yeah,
to admit it, but I mean, I remember that I really wasn't a good leader either. I was looking at all
yeah,
the good things I was doing, right? But I wasn't
yeah,
doing the same
yeah,
thing. And this
yeah.
really leads
So
into leadership principles, right? We've
Yes.
got to
Yeah.
practice and build through our leadership, whatever it takes mindsets in on our teams, for our teams. So what are some of
Yeah.
those key leadership principles? What bring
Yeah.
us home with this?
Okay. Sure. Absolutely. Well, I have three images. I like to teach with
I love, yeah,
metaphors.
yeah,
They're easier for me to remember. So,
yeah.
three real quick are these. The
Okay.
first one is simply called shortcut or second mile. As we grow older, whatever our age is, our brains try to be more and more efficient. Our energy levels go lower as we get older, and they try to, they really, what they try to do is they try to take shortcuts. There's nothing wrong with that.
Hmm.
But when I'm doing a task, I need to ask myself, am I a shortcut guy now or a second mile guy? And the
I love
second
that.
mile principle is you don't
Yeah.
just go the first mile that's required of you by your supervisor, you go the extra mile. So
There's no
shortcut or second,
roadblocks. Yeah,
yeah,
there's no
that's right.
roadblocks in that second mile because
That's
nobody's in there.
exactly right. Nobody's taking that road.
Nobody's
That's right.
nobody's in that second mile.
Your brain is naturally looking for efficiency. Force yourself to go the second
I
mile
like
to
that.
do more than what you were asked to do. The second metaphor is one I simply call 212 degrees.
I like
212
it.
degrees. Most everybody listening knows that water at 211 degrees is boiling hot. I mean, it's a boiling hot cup of tea or hot cup of coffee.
Hmm.
In fact, it's scorching. It's extra hot at Starbucks at 212 degrees, or excuse me, at 211 degrees. At 212 degrees, you cross a line, and that boiling water becomes steam that can power a locomotive engine.
Mm.
So that one single degree different between 211 and 212 is all the difference in the world in what it can
Wow.
accomplish.
Wow.
So I would just encourage people, talk about 212 degrees. Everybody can get hot. Who can become so hot you
Ooh, I
can
love
power a
this.
locomotive because that steam is
Man,
coming
this
out of
is
your
good. This is
yeah.
good.
The last one I have is one I think we might have talked about months ago, but I love it. It's called the Waldorf Principle. It's about an elderly couple that walked into a little motel in Pennsylvania way long time ago, like 100 years ago, and they were looking for a room. Well, George Bolt, the young man behind the counter, said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't have any rooms here. You may have to find a room somewhere else." But as this older couple turned around and walked toward the door, George remembered that it was raining outside and there was a convention in town, and there were probably no more rooms in any hotel. And so George, before they got out the door, said, "Hey, wait, 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 get back in here. You're going to stay here." And they go, "What do you mean stay here? You said there's no more rooms." He said, "Well, we are out of hotel rooms, but you can have my room." And they go, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "I live right next door. The sheets are
Wow.
clean. The towels are fresh. You can stay in my room." And the older couple argued with him, but George was younger and stronger, and he won the argument. And
I love
so
this.
he led the couple over next door and he let them sleep in his bed. Meanwhile, George stays up all night behind the front desk. Well, the story climaxes in the morning. This older couple walks back into the lobby, refreshed from a good night's rest. And the older man said, "What's your name?" And George said, "Well, my name is George Bolt. Why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, George, I have never been served so extravagantly and
Wow.
so sacrificially as you served me last night. One day, I plan to build the finest hotel in the world. And when I do, I'm going to contact
Mm.
you to run that hotel." And with that, Mr. Waldorf Astor walked out
Wow.
of the motel. And we all know the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York remains one
Wow.
of the finest hotels anywhere. But George
Absolutely.
Bull was called up from Pennsylvania to run that hotel, not because of a great strategic plan, but because
Because of
he
how he treated
served the
somebody.
extra mile. Those 212 degrees, he did more than what he was asked.
Man, I love this. I had not heard you tell that story. I love that. It gave me chill bumps as you were talking about it because look at that, serving other people and adding value to people. It's really what it's about, right? It's how we make that second mile and whatever it takes attitude. Wow, Tim, what a great episode today. Thank you so much for your wisdom as always. Listen, if you want to connect with us, visit us at maxwellleadership.com/generations at work. We'd love to hear from you. We've created some free downloadable resources, including some feedback and Generations at Work playbook. So that's maxwellleadership.com/generations generations at work. We so appreciate you being here with us. We'll see you next time on the podcast.